Hello everyone, welcome. This is Venkat Talapneni. As part of this presentation, I am going to talk about broadcasting technique in Spark. So before we go into that, so let's understand when we need this and when we are going to use it. So in Spark, so we can join two different data frames as if you are joining two tables in SQL world. So when you are joining two data frames, if the two data frames, let's say one data frame is very huge and the other one is, it's kind of a reference a data set, which could be like a lookup table. So if you are having a join the large data set with a smaller one, so if you use a regular join, what happens is, so for every record in the large data set, it would go and try to look up on the smaller data set. So what happens here is every time you are performing like a join operation, you are going over the network and go and fetch the record from the lookup. So and this happens across all the worker nodes wherever this data is distributed. So as we know, Spark is a distributed data framework, and this large data set is distributed across all the worker nodes. So every worker node would do the same. It would go to it would go over the network and fetch the data from the lookup. So this is, as we know, the first thing what we see here is there is a lot of traffic over the network, because for every large you are going and looking up for the small data set. And the second one is because of this IO and network, so the performance will be degraded. So in this case, like when you have a large data set and a smaller data set, you can use the broadcasting technique. So you can call it as a broadcasting variable broadcasting. It's like also be join hint. So the way you give parallel hints in Oracle, so here also you can use that broadcast hint. So when you join using this broadcast in Spark, what it does is it goes and make the smaller dataset available in all the worker nodes. So now when you perform the join with large data sets, so for every data set, every large data set record, join, it doesn't need to go over the network, whereas it has its in its own on the in memory of that worker node. So it doesn't need to travel. And at the same time, when we know that if something is available locally and it's in the memory, the access will be faster, and it would reduce the join time. It reduces the time for this join operation, and it reduces the network and IO. So the only, as we know, right, we talked about the smaller. So if the data set one, if both data sets are very large, very huge in size, obviously you cannot use this broadcast technique, because if worker node may not have memory to hold the entire data. So that's the reason the recommendation is, if the smaller data set is less than 10 MB, it's better to use broadcast technique. But if the data set is both the data sets are bigger, so this technique may not be helpful. So that's one caveat. Obviously you would also see when you perform this broadcast, right, and you can also see whether this technique whether it's Spark actually leveraging this technique or not, using this explain true. So you can use, and basically you can also see whether this technique is being used or not. So yeah, that's pretty much about a broadcast technique. Thank you for listening.